My name's Joseph. I'm from a well-to-do family in Arimathea, about 5 miles north of Jerusalem. But I've worked hard all my life, so I'm not short of a shekel or two. But the people on the council in Jerusalem recognised me and asked me if I'd join them there. And I was so pleased to do that because I want to do my bit for society. But it was a mixed blessing because the priests and the scribes and they've got so much power, and if you cross them, you're in real trouble. I mean, for instance, a while back there was a man who'd been blind from birth, but they threw him out of the synagogue and wouldn't let him back when he said that it was Jesus that had healed him. So I had to be really careful what I said in the council, and especially about Jesus. In fact, one of the other council members, Cornelius, I knew him, we'd chatted a bit together, but when Jesus first came to prominence, he went to see him for himself to find out about him, but he did it under cover of darkness so that the council wouldn't know. But he knew I was sympathetic, so afterwards he told me what happened. It was mind-blowing, life-changing. Jesus said it's not enough to be born a Jew, you've got to be born again into God's family. And that's why he'd come, if we believe in him. Well, I could see straight away that Jesus was the real deal. Nobody could do the things that he did without God being with him. So whenever I had the chance, I would go and hear him preach and follow him. I had to be careful because of the council. But it wasn't that difficult because he often went to the temple courts and taught there. And when he did, the scribes and the priests and the Pharisees would come and argue with him. They could never get the better of him until last night. They'd had enough and they got a mob together and armed all their guards and sent them to arrest Jesus and brought him back and interrogated him. And then first thing this morning, they got the whole council together to discuss what to do. And they agreed they would send Jesus to Pilate and ask him to crucify him. Well, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Once they decided that, I walked out and went home. I nothing to do with me. But that's what they did. They got a crowd, went to Pilate, demanded that he crucified Jesus. And so he agreed. Well, the news spread like wildfire that was what was happening. And when I heard, I immediately went to Golgotha, where they do the executions, the Romans. And when I got there, they'd nailed Jesus to the cross and they were just raising it up into position. It was awful. He must have been in absolute agony. And yet, when they did it, he prayed for their forgiveness. But it was awful. I couldn't bear to watch it. His body was so torn and bleeding all over from the scourging that they'd given him before they took him out for crucifixion, and the nails in his hands and feet and bunch of thorns on his head. It must have been agony. It was terrible. I couldn't bear to look. And then he went dark, almost as though God couldn't bear to look either. It was dark for about 3 hours. But then finally, Jesus cried out with a loud voice of triumph, "It is finished!" And then he died. All my hopes were pinned on him, and he's now dead. But I suddenly realised what I'd got to do. And I saw Nicodemus there, so I went to him and said, "Can you please stand by the cross and make sure that Jesus' body is kept safe?" And then I went as fast as I could to Pilate to speak to him, and thankfully Pilate recognised that I was a council member, so he gave me an audience straight away. And I asked him if I could have the body of Jesus so I could bury it. He didn't believe me. He said, "He can't be dead yet." It takes crucified victims a very, very long time to die. Anyway, he sent for the centurion who was in charge of the executions to come and bring him a report. And so I had to stand there and wait. And when the centurion arrived, there were a small group of my fellow countrymen with him. And Pilate went over to them, and I heard the centurion confirm, yes, Jesus is dead. And then the others who were with him said, will you please give the order to the centurion to break the legs of the other two that have been crucified, because it's nearly Sabbath, and it would be terrible to have people on crosses over the Sabbath day. So he agreed that the centurion should do that too. And he said something else to the centurion I didn't quite catch. But then they went off, and Pilate came back to me, and he said, yes, it's right, Jesus is dead. And I've just told the centurion that I'm giving you my authority to have the body of Jesus so you can bury it. It wasn't my idea to crucify him. I didn't want him to be crucified, but it was your people that made me do it. The least we can do is give him a decent burial. So I went back to Golgotha as fast as I could, and just as I arrived, they were breaking the legs of those other two, and they were screaming. Oh, it was awful. But it didn't take them long to die after that. But they didn't break Jesus' legs because they knew he was dead already, although one of the guards got his spear and stuck it in his side just to be sure. Anyway, when they lowered the cross back down, Nicodemus and I, with the help of one or two others, carried the body of Jesus to the garden that was very close by, because there's a rock face there, and I'd had a tomb dug out of that rock face not very long ago, actually, so there'd be somewhere to bury me when the time comes. So we laid Jesus there, and Nicodemus went and got myrrh and spices, and I got some clean linen cloth. And so we anointed the body of Jesus with the spices, the way you would anoint a king, and wrapped his body in the cloths, and then laid him to rest. And I'd also had a big rock carved out ready to cover the tomb. And so Nicodemus and I managed to push it across and cover the tomb with it. And then we came away. But as I was coming away, one of the other council members saw me, and he called to me and said that a group of them had just discussed things, and it was too late tonight, but first thing tomorrow they're going to go and ask Pilate to put a guard on the tomb, because they'd heard Jesus say he was going to rise from the dead, and they wanted to make sure the disciples couldn't steal the body and pretend he had. Can Jesus rise from the dead? Well, he raised people from the dead, but now it's him that's dead, and dead people can't do anything, can they? And nobody else can raise the dead. All my hopes and ambitions, they're lying dead in that tomb. So I don't know what we're going to do. Well, I have to wait until after the Sabbath and see what happens. But I'll tell you one thing. If Jesus does rise from the dead, the entire Roman army won't be able to stop him.